Right, we're on to week 4 out of 4 with a topic which will affect everyone, whether it be within cricket, the world of work, any environment really. And this is managing performance anxiety. So to begin with, Tara, we're just going to have a think about what is anxiety. And for me, the thing that I was saying just before is that it's a word that we use quite frequently, and it can be both in a clinical sense where someone will be in receipt of help and support from a medical professional, but also we experience different levels of anxiety in our lives, and to an extent the presence of anxiety can be useful to help us be motivated to focus in on the particular task, particularly in a pressure environment. So from your perspective, what does the word anxiety or performance anxiety remind you of or bring up for you?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's definitely nerves and excitement in one. I think a little bit of nerves is brilliant for performance. Like you said, it sort of makes you concentrate a bit more. And also it shows you care, which I think is also important. It shows you care about performing well and doing well, and it's something that you take a lot of pride in. Again, if there is a little bit too much anxiety or nerves, then it can definitely hinder performance. So it's about finding that sweet spot and sort of trying that optimal sweet spot where you can perform well, but actually it's not taking over.
Yeah, and finding that balance is probably a life's work in most people's cases. Some things to be wary of in terms of, like you mentioned, it becoming something which isn't manageable. It would be based around things where we maybe see anxiety triggered by build-up of stress, whether that's in a sports environment or elsewhere. Also, if there's lots of change or uncertainty, if we've got causes as well, like money problems or housing problems, relationship problems, losing people close to us, being lonely, having things like stresses and strains which are related to things that are situational or contextual in our lives. If this is something which then is becoming a point where it makes it difficult to live your life as normal, then that is the time really to have a discussion and speak with someone regarding getting help and support with that. What we're looking at a bit more closely this afternoon or this evening is around it in a performance context, in this case cricket, where it's a case of probably managing that, because as you say, it is a feature of what goes on. But it is important to pull those two apart to an extent in saying what is performance anxiety compared to what might be a more clinical expression of it. So with this, next thing for us to have a think about is then, how can it impact cricket? Now I'm going to go over to you here for some of your experiences in terms of when it's been problematic, or also when it has been a bit of a spur and a motivation as well.
Yeah, so I think, definitely when I've sort of experienced maybe on the other end of the spectrum a little bit too much anxiety or nerves, it just makes everything foggy, I think. And whether that's sporting or in general life, I think there's this sort of mist that we see, and it for me it's made it really difficult to think clearly and rationally. As a bowler as well, it makes it really difficult to actually, I become really sort of internal and very fixated on just the outcome, as opposed to taking a step back. And even at the most, I'm not even thinking about my field. I can't even think which is the best field for me. And sort of anyone talking to me, it kind of just becomes a big fog. So definitely that inability to make rational decisions, to think clearly, and then to actually do my skill. That's definitely affected me, and especially, I've experienced it, this sort of wave of overwhelmingness. And it means I'm not enjoying my cricket. So for me, if I'm not enjoying it, well, actually, I know I'm not going to perform well, and it sort of becomes this vicious cycle. That's my personal experience, I guess, on it.
Yeah, and when you've explained that, some of those elements of the fog and the inability to be able to see through it, I can empathise with, not necessarily in cricket perhaps if I paid a bit more attention to my cricket, I might get some of these feelings. But in terms of other areas, I certainly can think about that, where you can't really navigate a way through it, and there's maybe a constant obsession with what's going to happen and fretting and worrying over that. And I think in cricket, we have that laid out for us because we know, due to the nature of the game, that there is going to be a set of deliveries that follow, and they will come. And that can be something which can be quite daunting if it's not going so well. So with the struggles that you've had from that, what's happened over the years which has helped you be able to manage and deal with it better?
Yeah, so I think if you'd asked me this even, a year ago, my advice would have been, or what I would have done, was to get through the over as quick as possible. So not even think and just hope for the best, run in a million miles an hour and just get out the over as quick as possible. Now I probably would try and slow it down. For example, if I was in a game and I've just been hit for a boundary and I'm starting to see a bit of fog, it's trying to take a moment out. So whether it's I'll tie my hair up or do my shoelaces or speak to mid on, mid off and try and get some clarity, and almost use my walk back to my run up as sort of that reflection. So reflect on the outcome. Okay, park it, put it to one side. Okay, next ball, be really clear. What's my role? What have I got to do? Is my field set for this? Okay, turn around. And once I've turned around, okay, this is it, a new start. And it's easier said than done. And, I can say that now, but in a game, there's so many external cues. It's trying to, I suppose, limit those and be really clear on what your job is.
How about in between games? Because I think a lot of people will find that they can get very worked up in preparation for a game, and then when they're in the moment, it can kind of take care of itself. But what about your experience of anxiety in the lead up to a game?
Yeah, so I guess, again, for me, it's if I know, I don't really like using the term big game because every game should be a big game. I think if you pin it down to, or put this big expectation on certain games, again, you're just setting yourself up to create more anxiety around a game. But for me, again, it's planning well. So knowing roughly, okay, well, who am I going to play? Okay, what do these batters do? What are these players like? And if I know my game inside out and I know the plan, that kind of puts it at ease. And then, yeah, like you said, once you start playing and it just sort of goes into that flow state. And then if it does, things crop up, well, for me, if I know I've done the prep, I know I've done, my however many minute bowling warm up, I've bowled, over around the wicket, I've bowled my slow balls, I've done, my mobility, I've slept well, and I've done all these things. I know that I've taken care of that. And, if anything does happen, I can fall on the B plan. But yeah, that prep is just crucial, I guess.
Mm. And that's all things that you control, isn't it? That you
Yeah,
put in
absolutely.
place to get yourself in the best possible position to be able to execute the skills that you've worked hard on. We're going to just think now, and you've already given some ideas of this, about ideas for managing that performance anxiety. So some of the things that you've gone through there, I think, are really good to start off with. I'm going to think of one here linked to what you've said regarding that perspective of preparing well. I've been speaking with as many people as I can, really, from different walks of life, not just cricket, about these elements of how to manage nerves or anxiety, stress, pressure. It can often be called lots of different things, but it still will then result in some discomfort for somebody. And this idea of preparing well seems to come over very, very much. That can be a problem, though, when, like we mentioned the other week, some of the procrastination might get in there, for thinking that by engaging with the preparation for the game, I'm reminding myself of the game, and that's what's worrying me, and then that can be a bit of a cycle there. So typically for yourself, if you've got a game coming up, which we're not that far off the season now, what's the different tapering for preparation for a game? So you'll have your pre-season, of course, but as you're in the build up to a game, when you get in them regularly, how does your workload differ between different stages before a game?
Yeah, I guess at the start of the season, everyone's got those touchy nerves. There's a lot of expectations to do well. For me, I'm a massive, which again, it's a bit of a pro and a con, but I seek a lot of reassurance from people. So whether it's my captain or my coach, I need a lot of reassurance before a game, especially pre-season when, again, everyone's a bit nervy. So for me, unfortunately, I've always struggled with sort of belief in my ability. So for me, I need a lot of confidence before a game, so I know who's the best person to speak to, who I suppose not can sort of big up my ego, but also just give me that confidence and that clarity that they've got belief in me. Which again is brilliant, but sometimes if they're not there, I need to step by myself, which is something I really struggle with. And I guess as the season goes on and you've got that competence and you've got those past experiences of, previous successful performances, again, that just sort of adds to the confidence. And by the end of it, you hopefully should be in that sort of flow state. And if you've got back-to-back games, you almost haven't got time to dwell or to worry, because you can't really carry that baggage into the next game, because I've done it and honestly it's awful. You're thinking about the last game and it completely hinders your ability to, one, back yourself, and two, I guess, focus on the now, which is what we've said over these last few weeks, and be really sort of present in that game. If you're carrying sort of past experiences, whether they're successful or not, you're not truly in that game, and I think that's dangerous. Well, not dangerous, but definitely can affect performance.
Funny you should mention that idea of reminding yourself of the good performances, because I keep hearing this. I don't know whether I wasn't listening years ago, but now it seems to come up a lot more, that people say they're looking for those ways of reminding themselves of what they can do, because lots of people struggle with that confidence or generating that belief. And I guess for people, there's a few ways that can be done. I often speak about the Mark Waugh example, which is he had on his thigh pad a stick figure and the name of a team for each first class 100 he scored. And Slazenger in the 1990s bought out a thigh pad which was based on this. So people of a certain age would be like, oh God, yeah, that thigh pad. And that was so simple, but a really great way of doing it, that you'd be able to look down and see, actually, I've done this before, I can do this. And maybe not everyone's going to be scribbling over their kit, but those little things like that, creating some kind of highlight reel or so on. Is there anything that you do deliberately to foster that? Or is it more about, in your mind, going over that and reinforcing it?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's something I do before I bowl, and that's I tap my shoulders, and there's a lot of weird superstitious things I do when I play, if you watch closely. But before I bowl, I'll tap my shoulders, and it's something a coach told me ages ago about puffing your chest out, and sort of walking on the pitch as if you're, sort of the best player on the planet, and almost a little bit fake it till you make it. So for me, I puff my chest out kind of thing, to sort of psych myself up and, I guess, boost my ego. And I mean, it's silly, but it works, and it's something which has sort of become my bowling prep. I'm trying to think which player it was. It could be Matt Pryor, when someone said in the Sussex changing room, when he played for Sussex, that he used to write down mantras, and he used to have photos of him playing really well, and I was baffled actually, and really surprised at such a successful player, yet he still had all these cues and these mental notes to sort of, I guess, remind him actually how good of a player he was. And it's, it's so common, and people need that. And especially when, especially in cricket performances, it fluctuates so much, or in any sport, having that sort of reminder of, actually I can do this, I've done this before. And it sort of puts your mind at ease, I guess. And it's quite comforting as well, knowing that you've done this. So it's nothing new, and you've got it in the locker. It's just trying to get it out there.
Yeah, and it does feed into the idea of developing oneself as a player, as a person. If, for example, we were to have unshakable self-belief, never doubt ourselves, I always think that could lead to some degree of complacence. So just finding that sweet spot in the middle between being able to give yourself the boost, the confidence to do something, but also at times be prepared to take an honest look and say, I could do that better, but not thinking about the I could do better and diminishing overall that you have the capacity to be able to do it. So that preparing in whichever way we do it is really important. Something else that I thought of was the idea, particularly as we're leading into games, about how we view our previous performances. And you've mentioned there, if you can have too long to think about it, that can be really difficult to get over that. What we do regarding our view of failure and how we maybe reframe it can do something towards reducing that anxiety, because I observe in players of all standards this clutching at trying to make up for a bad performance and saying, oh, I need to get runs now, I need to get wickets, and then building that pressure, and then the anxiety can follow from there. Whereas everyone has periods where they don't score runs or take many wickets, even the very best. So in terms of that, the reframing the failures, what's your take there in terms of not clinging on to what's gone before, because then it can affect what's going to come after?
Yeah, I guess it's hard when you're playing, once every 2 weeks or so. It's easy to cling on to those past performances. I guess as well with cricket, it's one of those sports where you're more likely to fail than not. I think there's a stat, you have one in every 4 good innings as a batter, which is awful. It's a terrible stat, but unfortunately it's true. And I think the quicker you get into the mindset of, well, inevitably I'm going to get out in this game at some point, whatever number you bat. So actually I may as well go out there, I may as well perform and do as best as I can, play to my strengths, be really clear. Whereas if we're going into that game hesitant, sort of that fear of failure, we can't play with that freedom, we can't express ourselves, inevitably you are going to get out. And so once you sort of overcome that and actually rationalize that, then I think we can sort of play without that fear of failure and that more freedom and play more to your own sort of game. I know it's easier said than done, but again, that was something for me. I never wanted to get out. I was terrified of getting out because that meant I was failing. But actually, if you stay in and and chew a load of dot balls, then, well, it's almost the same, really, depending on the situation, of course.
Yeah, so maybe the way the game has progressed and the pace of it and the shortened formats has perhaps got us more primed to accept failure, because, as you say, there's no point hanging around and taking a load of dot balls when someone else could be out there moving things along. Whereas in a longer format, even in league cricket for people, you do have the luxury of time to play yourself in and then maybe worrying about giving your wicket away. So that's just a little thought with it. So reframing our failures or so-called failures is something that can help. And maybe we look also at the expectations we have of a game of cricket in terms of anxiety from there. Where's the balance for you there? Because, of course, being paid to play, being a professional player, you can't just say to your coach or people in the team, oh, well, you know what, I just really enjoy it. I really like it at the moment. That's great. That's lovely if you are, but there is the results end of it as well. So for that part of it, expectations and then anxiety that can come with that, where do you maneuver with that?
Yeah, that's a really valid point. And luckily, I mean, I don't think I've got to that stage yet, but only just being professional for just under a year now. But yeah, definitely expectation is probably the worst things that we can do to ourselves. And I think it's completely internal. So it's almost, the situation is only as big as you make it. So if we depend all our performances on this expectation of, oh, I'm not going to get a contract or, XYZ, it's so much worse. Obviously, like I said, you're more likely to fail than not. But I think if you have that ability to bounce back and almost park those previous performances, the better you'll do. And also, I think if you're training and playing X amount of hours a week, you almost think, well, why would I not back myself to do well? I'm putting in these hours, I've got them under my belt, and it's almost that I've got that competence, I've prepped for it, so why should I not go out and perform? And it's about not getting in your head so much, I guess. But yeah, I'm yet to hopefully yet to experience that. But yeah, I think you make the situations as big as you perceive it.
I like that perspective, because the opposite can be, for some, I've put all this effort into training, therefore I must have a certain outcome, and applying that pressure there. So maybe that other side of saying, well, I should be able to do well here. I'm approaching it with that curiosity, but also I've got the evidence of having done things well in the past. And it's probably a little bit about, even in the professional game, connecting with why you play, and is there something that you can get out of that game, even if you don't perform with the statistical evidence that you might be looking for. And I think it was last summer when I was speaking with one player on our podcast who was talking about time when he was out injured and making the most of being a good support, a good teammate. And even when we might not get any runs or take any wickets or even be bad in the field, there's always that fourth element that we've spoken about, that of being a teammate. And I think that's perhaps the key for the final strategy or idea that or theme that I've been thinking of. And that's a way of managing that performance anxiety, is to talk, and like this always comes up, to share a little bit and access other people's perspectives, because surely one person in the dressing room is not the only one who will be experiencing some of these worries. How easy is it, though, from your experience at whenever you've played, to be able to find a route to get that help with something which is around performance anxiety?
Yeah, I don't know if it's different with females compared to males. I know when I've definitely gone through some sort of rough patches, I've found it really difficult to talk to, especially within my team. And I almost sort of went to a non-cricket friend who almost had no sort of relationship to the game. And for me, that sort of gave really good perspective, and it was really nice actually to get non-cricket feedback and advice, and that sort of simplified the problem, I guess. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Speak to anyone, a friend, family, your coach, your captain, your teammate, anyone, and almost even just that relief of telling someone makes such a difference. And then a problem shared is a problem solved kind of thing. If you were to speak to your coach, it could be, I don't think I'm good enough, or I've got expectation on this. And just by sharing that, you can just gain more clarity and reassurance, and just sort of ease that you've told someone, and someone knows. And I think just letting it, almost taking the load off, makes such a difference. And it's that first person. Once you tell that one person, it becomes so much easier.
Yeah, I definitely go with what you've said there about someone from outside of the context, whether it be cricket, work, and so on. But I found what can make that really effective is having to explain the situation in quite simple terms, without the jargon, without any prior knowledge required. Doing it that way can simplify the problem for yourself. I found that professionally, where I've maybe been struggling with whatever in teaching, being able to get everything done in time, the way students are responding, the way I'm managing my workload, whatever. If I speak about that to a fellow teacher, there is a temptation for just to get a lot of sympathy. Oh, I know, yeah, it is difficult. I know, we're in such a tough profession, blah, blah, blah. Which it might feel good at the time, going, oh, actually, yeah, we are really hard done by. But it's not helping. Whereas if I might explain to a friend who's not in that area, they'd say, well, what does that mean? Why is that? And then I might be able to say, okay. And I'm sure, yeah, with cricket in your case, but I would say to someone, it's not about landing that Yorker in a particular place, it's about the things that are around it. So that's definitely a route. And perhaps if people are thinking in this performance idea, whether it be sport or work, there can be that worry that expressing that vulnerability might be something which someone then identifies as being, maybe that person's not quite up for it. Now, we would love that to be to be different, and things are moving in that direction where we see vulnerability in factors, I would say, is an essential. And it's really that courage to be able to do that marks someone out as being the right kind of character for me. But it might be easier just to take someone outside of it to dip your toe in the water if you're trying it for the first time. So let me just put up our last slide here, which is the 3 questions related to what we've discussed. And 2 of them are about performance anxiety, and 1 is about the 4 weeks as a whole. So the experiences for someone to think about, what experiences do I have of performance anxiety? Tara, you've mentioned there your experiences of it, which might chime a chord with people. What strategies can I use? Well, we've gone through a few of them there, and perhaps the one which was touched on indirectly is some of those things about slowing it down, where you talked about routines with bowling. So some of the breathing exercises I think are important also to mention there. But also, what are my next steps to look after my well-being? Because we've introduced 4 areas here across these sessions, and hopefully when people have viewed, they've bought into it in the sense of it's about what works for you. So as we finish, we've spent a bit of time reflecting on this as well, of course. What's your next steps for your cultivation of your approach to well-being?
Yeah, I guess if I'm going performance-based, it's definitely knowing that I'm never going to perform as well if I'm not taking care of my well-being. So for me, those 3 basic things that we spoke about, diet, sleep, and also sort of my relationship with people, and that connection are really the 3 biggest things for me. And I know if I can control them well and really sort of home in on them, then as an athlete, as a cricketer, I'm hoping that it's definitely going to sort of translate into my cricket, and help me perform well. And also, yeah, general well-being, make me enjoy my cricket, make me enjoy the time that I spend with my teammates and performing and things like that.
Excellent. I'm similar in that I'm definitely going to be paying attention to those core ideas that we've had, and something I've started doing this week, which may be a benefit to other people who have sort of a range of commitments in their life, which obviously we all do, is I'm trying to organize my time so that I don't feel like everything's riding on one thing. So if I spend all my time obsessing over work or Open Up Cricket or my own cricket club or particular relationships, then if they're not going quite so well, I can feel like everything's not going so well. So within the parameters that I have, I'll be thinking, okay, I want to get my work done within these hours because it is important to do. I feel great when I've done it, but then I want to be able to switch off and realize that if I've had a bad day at work, I've always got something which can come back from there. So whether that be a hobby, which is of course not in many ways is not as important as work because you're not paid for it, but in other ways it's perhaps as important because in the moment that you're doing it, that is the important thing. So I've got a few little things that I do which are just for me. No one else would be interested in. In fact, I'm certain no one else would be interested in a couple of these things I'm thinking of. But that's great because I don't need to, there's no expectations. There's no element of having to impress anyone or whatever. So that's always worth thinking about. What do we have which is just exclusively for us that we can just get lost in and think about from there? So thank you for your time this evening and indeed across the previous 3 weeks. And I look forward to doing some more stuff in this area with you, Tara. And as we're almost in April, good luck with the last bit of pre-season, and we'll look forward to seeing how things develop across 2021.
No, thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.